Hello, statistics and precalculus! We are on Safari today in search of the elusive inverse function, which hasn't been seen in these parts for perhaps as long as 6 months, going as far back as even October or perhaps even September. So let us search for this inverse function in the context of square and cube roots. Yes, square and cube roots. First off, remember the graphs of y equals x squared and y equals x cubed. Y equals x squared is your famous parabola, the quadratic function, the domain, all real numbers, the range, non-negative real numbers. 0 is the lowest point and it is included as part of the graph on the vertex. It is not a one-to-one function. For instance, the point y, the value y equals 4 has two x coordinates, x equals -2 or x equals +2. We could do that on the graph. On the other hand, y equals x cubed, the bent paperclip graph, the domain is all real numbers, the same as x squared, but the range is also all real numbers. This is a one-to-one function because every y value has exactly one x value corresponding with it. Now, that elusive inverse. Remember what we know about inverses. In order to find an inverse, and we are looking on Safari for our inverses, to find an inverse on a table, you switch x and y. On the other hand, if what you have is a graph, then you switch x and y. But if we have an equation, in that case, what you do is you switch x and y. You may notice there's a pattern here. This is something to pay attention to. Let's take a look at what it looks like on Desmos. Let's look at these graphs. Here is y equals x squared. The inverse, if you switch x and y, looks like so. X equals y squared is the new equation. Y equals x squared, x equals y squared. Notice the points. The points on this graph, -2, 4, -1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 4, all points that you're familiar with. The points on this graph, it won't give me a table, but you switch x and y. 4, -2 is a point on this graph. 4, -2. Likewise, 1, -1. Pretty close anyway. 0, 0, 1, 1, and 4, 2. All points on the graph. On the other hand, y equals x cubed. We know y equals x cubed, x equals y cubed, looks like such. Y equals x cubed, we can make the table. When x is -2, y is positive -8. -1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, and 8, 2. And likewise, you notice on the inverse, 2, 8 on the original, and on the inverse you have 8, 2, and 1, 1, and and 0, 0, and -1, 1, and -8, -2. All very lovely. The last bit, inverse functions. If a function is one-to-one, then its inverse is also a function. Take a look at our graphs. The inverse, the blue inverse, is indeed a function. A vertical line only hits it once, and if you know the x value, you get exactly one y value. On the other hand, the inverse of y equals x squared is not a function. And in fact, if you were trying to find this as a function, what you would do is you would you would have to do two parts of it. The first part is the square root. The second part, the lower part, is the negative of the square root. And we'll do that tomorrow in particular. But in the meantime, we've got the inverse functions. The inverse of a one-to-one function is also a function, like x cubed. The inverse of a function that's not one-to-one is not a function, like x squared. To find an inverse function, switch x and y, and then solve for y. A couple of practice ones just to remind you of how this went. F of x equals 3x plus 7. You say x equals 3y plus 7. Switch x and y, and now solve for y. X minus 7 equals 3y, and so y is x minus 7 divided by 3. So F inverse of x is x minus 7 over 3. There we go. What about this one? X, switch x and y, this would be the same as y originally. X equals the log base 3 of y. Turn this into an exponential equation. You get 3 to the x equals y. So the inverse of the logarithmic function is an exponential function. Likewise, the inverse of an exponential function is logarithmic, if you remember that. Yes, the first step, sometimes I sort of skipped it on this one, is to say that this is y. So on this one, y equals 3x squared is the original, so x equals 3y squared is the inverse. X over 3 equals y squared. And when you take the square root, y is plus or minus the square root of x over 3, because x squared always has more than one answer. So not a function. The inverse is not a function in that case, which is what we saw from the graph. And last but not least, we'll go orange on, this is y equals 7x cubed, so the inverse x equals 7y cubed. X over 7 is y cubed, and y is the cube root of x over 7, and it's okay to take a cube root of positive or negative, so we do have an inverse function. Cube root of x over 7. There we go. You are set for today. Congratulations on bagging an inverse function for the first time in a long time.